So I wrote a book called Visual Intelligence, How We Create What We See in 1998. And there I was already convinced now that our perceptions need not be tethered to reality. And I had studied some evolutionary theory, and I was beginning to think that evolution might not shape us to see reality as it is, but I hadn't worked out any arguments about that. So I just presented the basic um, ideas about perception of color and shape and motion and so forth, and showed how we construct them, and argued that maybe our perceptions are just an interface. They're not a window on the truth. And the reception of that book was interesting. It was used as a textbook in various universities. It was well received, except for the last chapter where I suggest that we don't see reality. That I say maybe it's just user interface, and people say, great book, except for that last chapter where Hoffman goes off the rails, and things sort of fall apart there. But if you skip the last chapter, it's a good book.
Do you
So
mind building out more of what the nugget of the book where you're like, I need to write a book about this, premise, build out a little bit more about that interface concept?
right, so what I argued there was that uh, our senses, we tend to think of our senses as like a camera, and we're just taking a picture of the truth. And it's a pretty faithful depiction. What you see, if I see an apple sitting on the table, I'm not seeing all of reality, but it's a pretty faithful depiction of a real apple that would be there even if there were no creatures to perceive it, and a real table that would still be there, even if everybody on the planet died. And so what I argue is that that point of view may not be right. It may be that our senses are more like a desktop interface on your computer. So if you're writing an email, I mean, all you see, and you would say the icon for your email is blue and rectangular in the middle of your desktop. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that the email itself is blue and rectangular in the middle of your laptop. I mean,
Right.
anybody who thought that would completely misunderstand the point of the desktop interface. It's not there to show you the truth, which would be the circuits and software, the voltages and magnetic fields in the computer. The interface is there to hide all of that really messy reality and give you simple eye candy, simple tools that let you control all the circuits and software without having to know anything about the details of it. And so,
Well, and
so
that analogy couldn't become even more um, spot on with this conversation right now over Zoom.
right,
I am obviously I'm perceiving that we're having this conversation. I'm getting towards what I ultimately want, which would be wisdom and conversation with you. But and my brain is perceiving that I'm moving towards that goal. But reality, I'm staring at a screen that is plasma.
that's right. Just pixels on a screen, and yet I infer, I think honestly and accurately, something about what you're thinking, something about what you're feeling, and whether you're interested or not. So we get some access to other people through this, but yeah, it's like instead of saying that space and time and physical objects are an objective reality and we're seeing them fairly truly, the idea was that no, this is like a VR headset. So think of space time as a virtual reality headset and physical objects as icons in that headset. And but I didn't have any proof. There was no, I mean, all I could say was that everything we know about visual perception is compatible with that idea. It doesn't dismiss that idea, but I couldn't say that any of our best scientific theories entail that idea. And so I realized in like 2005, 2006 that um, if I wanted people to take this idea seriously, I needed to show that it was somehow entailed by our best theories. So I looked at evolution by natural selection. And I wondered, is it possible to show that natural selection itself would not favor organisms that see reality as it is, that they would in fact shape our senses. Natural selection would shape our senses to be more like a user interface. My intuition was that maybe I could show that because seeing reality is going to take too much time and too much energy. That was my intuition. And it turns out that that's true, but not terribly deep. But you have to start somewhere. And so I started with that idea. I got a couple of really good grad students, Brian Marion and Justin Mark, to start working with me around 2009. They wrote 100 simulations that did hundreds of thousands of games. It turns out that evolution by natural selection is a mathematically precise theory. There's something called evolutionary game theory. And so we can actually run simulations about natural selection to see what would happen. And I wanted to see if, as we played with the costs and so forth, that the energy costs and so forth, the time costs for computing reality, that maybe reality wouldn't be favored by natural selection in terms of the sensory systems that evolved.
And what
And we
would be
found that was
what would be favored as the
more
alternative?
like a user interface, so that we would have natural selection would favor sensory systems of organisms that don't show reality, that just show you tricks and hacks about what you need to do. Just like the desktop interface, right? I have these little icons and little eye candy that gives me clever shortcuts that what I'm really doing is toggling voltages in the computer. That's what I'm really doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I have these little shortcuts that let me do that without knowing what I'm doing, right? That's the whole point of the interface. And so that was the idea, that evolution would give us these little bits of eye candy that we could act on that would then affect reality in the ways we needed to affect reality, but we wouldn't really know what we were doing. And so it was those simulations that showed, that's true, but the deeper idea that it hadn't occurred to me. And so it only came out of actually doing the hard work of running the simulations and looking at evolutionary theory very carefully, that we got the deeper idea, which is that the payoff functions that govern natural selection, and we can talk about payoff functions in a minute, but those payoff functions erase information about reality. So I'll unpack that a little bit, but that's going to be the bottom line. The payoff functions that drive evolution do not contain the information needed to see reality. So there's no way that natural selection could shape us or any organism's sensory systems of any kind. So not just vision, smell, touch, taste, any sensory system of any organism cannot be shaped by natural selection to show reality. And so the notion of a payoff function is a central notion in evolutionary game theory. So it's not too far afield to think about evolutionary game theory as like video games. So like in a video game, what you have to do is to focus on getting points as fast as you can without getting killed. And if you get enough points in the allotted time without getting killed, you get to go to the next level and keep going. And it's like that in evolution. You have to get fitness payoffs. And if you get enough fitness payoffs and avoid fitness harm, then you don't go to the next level of the game, but your genes go through your progeny, through your kids, into the next generation. And so it's just like in a video game. If you are dawdling around and doing anything but focusing on how to get points, you're going to lose. And it's the same thing in evolution. If your sensory systems do anything else but tell you how to behave to get fitness payoffs and how to avoid fitness harm, then you're going to die. You won't pass on your genes to the next generation, or at least your probabilities for that will go way down. So that's a key intuition. The fitness payoffs are going to drive what your sensory systems tell you, because they're going to be guiding your actions.
They're going to be guiding the prioritization of what you see